Yeah, I'll show you how to get it, but you have to be willing to do the work. The Syndicate, it's a motherfucking movement.
It's a syndicate.
You ain't gotta be perfect, long as you down to put the work in. If when it comes to the bullshit you allergic, well, you just might be my kind of person. Welcome to the Syndicate, where real estate wholesaling is what the business is. Ain't gotta talk about it when you out here living it. So if you out here getting it, then welcome to the Syndicate. Welcome to the Syndicate. Welcome to the Syndicate.
Hey, you probably already heard the news, but we just launched Investor Plug. It's literally an all-in-one system that gives you everything you need to be successful. Everything from a custom CRM designed around your business and how you work, AI chatbot that's state-of-the-art, a marketing funnel designed to generate leads, and so much more. It's basically a business in the box that helps you do more in less time, so you can focus on what really matters, closing deals and making money. Now, some people, they need big teams. Others, they use Investor Plug. So check it out today, investorplug.io. Again, investorplug.io. And let me show you how we can take your business to the next level. As a guest, I think it's going to be a very interesting show because we get to hear what he looks for in his flips and how wholesalers can work with buyers, as well as hearing his story. So I think it's going to be a lot of value for everyone. But Nate, thank you so much for joining us today, man.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate you having me.
For people who might not know who you are yet, do you want to do us a quick intro?
Yeah, Nathan DeWindt. I'm a high-end flipper in San Antonio. I'm trying to get further out of San Antonio, but I've been trying to do that for years, honestly. I really like doing stuff out in Comal County, Guadalupe County, kind of like Bulverde, Spring Branch, Canyon Lake, New Braunfels. But there's just, you got Alamo Heights, Menke Park, Olmos Park, Dominion, where there's a lot of high-end stuff in San Antonio. So I get brought back here a lot. So I'm finishing one up right now in San Antonio, then moving to a really big flip up in Canyon Lake. And then I'm going to try to stay over there because we just moved back to New Braunfels again after being here for about another year and a half. But yeah, that's kind of my deal.
I love it, man. So how did you first get into real estate?
So I used to run hotels. And I think the first house I bought, I was living in Colorado. I was living in Vail. And I bought a house while I was working in hotels, and then had, like, I guess now it's called house hacking, but back then I was just like, oh, I'm going to have roommates pay my mortgage. Like, why pay for it myself? And so this was before I listened to Bigger Pockets or anything like that. So I didn't know that it had a name for it. So I was like, well, how can I live for free? Mm-hmm. So I had 2 roommates. I renovated the condo that I had bought. So I turned the upstairs loft into like an upstairs master suite. And so then I lived in that, and then they rented out the 2 bedrooms downstairs. And then tax time came around, and instead of owing the government for the first time ever, I got a refund, and it was pretty substantial. So, most of my friends were like, oh yeah, man, I got $1,200 from the government thinking of going to Cancun or something. And mine came back at like $8,500. And I was like, how did I get all this? And they were just like, oh yeah, it's a tax write-off because you're using it as a rental. And I was like, oh, okay, sweet. So, and I was just using like TurboTax back then. Mm-hmm. And so that was the first deal. And I was like, there's something to this real estate thing. And so I did that. Then when I left Colorado, I kept my house, and then it was a full rental after that. And then I was cash flowing $1,100 a month on that, which it's kind of unheard of. I was breaking a rule. I'll admit it. I was breaking a rule where up there it's a deed restricted property, so you have to live there to be able, like, to work there to be able to buy in this community. That was one of the restrictions, and just because it's a tourist area, so it's like there's so much money that comes in. If they didn't have anything for locals, there'd be nowhere for any locals to live. It would just be $700,000 for a condo, and nobody would be able to afford to live there. So I had bought in that area. Mm-hmm. So the housing there can only appreciate at 6% max, and it's tied with median income. Mm-hmm. So if income goes up, like wages go up 2%, the house can go up 2%. If wages go up 10%, the house can go up 6%. There's still a cap on it, and that's what keeps the prices reduced enough for locals. So anyway, when I left, you are allowed to rent it for up to a year, and then you have to come back. And so I never came back. In that time, I had moved back to California. Then I moved to San Antonio, all for hotels jobs. And so I was getting that income in. So I'm like, man, I'm making $1,100 a month off this. like basically hands free. Every now and then there'd be an issue and I'd pay somebody to go fix it, but still I was crushing it on that one house, like one door, making $1,100 a month. So I was like, man, this is sweet. Then tax time came around again, another $8,500 return. I was like, all right, this is sweet. Like, okay, now maybe I should do this. And so basically every time I moved to get a new job in a hotel, I would buy a new house in that new location. And then when I would leave, I would rent it out. And so then I started to build my rental portfolio that way. And then the job that I was running a hotel as a director of operations for a hotel in San Antonio, Hotel Contessa, I started doing Airbnbs as well. And it kind of lent itself to real estate because I'm used to running hotels. So I literally used a lot of the people from the hotel, the housekeepers. I'd be like, hey, when you guys are off today, I need you to go clean my Airbnb, or like, but I knew the schedule of all the housekeepers. So then it was really easy to be like, hey, on Wednesday I have a turn. Who's not working on Wednesday? And then I could just go down to the housekeeping department and be like, do you guys want to make $150 on Wednesday? Oh, of course. All right, cool. Clean this house. They check out at 11. It's got to be done by 1. Okay, cool. So they started doing that. And then the girls at the front desk were running the Airbnb, like online for me. And so as they were doing that, I was like, man, this is, if you are willing to give up some of the equity in it, you know, it was like basically a turnkey business. So I had the front desk girls running all the communications, and then I had the housekeeping team cleaning the Airbnbs for me, and then I was paying each of them. And so I made a decent enough profit on it, you know, in the busy months. So that got me into it. And then I started flipping because I sold that house in Colorado. I know this is a long-winded answer, but it all makes sense. So when I sold that house in Colorado, because my year was up, you know, and they called me and they're like, hey, the neighbors say you haven't been here for like 12, 13 months. You're not allowed to do that. I was like, no, I'm aware. So they forced me to sell the house. I was fine with it. I knew it was coming. So I sold that house, and I think I made like, it wasn't a lot, but I made like $46,000 on that. And then that was tax-free because I had lived in the house 2 of the last 5 years. So then I was like, well, now it's tax-free income again. So I was like, okay. So I made about $33,000 in rent. That was tax-free. Then I was writing off depreciation once I wasn't in it. And then when I sold the house, I made $48,000 tax-free again. So I was like, this is just kind of like a well that keeps on giving, you know?
Yeah.
And so then when I did that, then I was like, now I'm going to start flipping more in San Antonio. So I started flipping. And then once I got to the point where my flipping income, it wasn't quite what I was making, because I was making 6 figures running hotels. But I was close, you know, I was probably making like 80 a year flipping, 70 or 80 a year. And I went, this is way better than showing up to my job that, you know, I no longer like. And so that's when I made the shift and left hotels. I did take one more gig that kind of like got me out of retirement. And I went back to Palm Springs and ran some hotels there. And then COVID hit, and it was the best thing that ever happened for me, for my business. It was just like, when you get hesitant to quit your 9 to 5, because I'm a huge fan of people quitting their 9 to 5s and doing real estate. But that kind of forced me to. And so I was already wanting to get out. And then when I moved to Palm Springs, I knew immediately I'd made the wrong decision. But I wanted to stick it out because I don't like to quit on stuff. So I was like, all right, I'll at least give them 6 months, you know, and then let them know, hey, I think I'm going to go back, and then help them transition. And then COVID hit, and they made me lay off every single person across the hotels. So I had to have a bunch of tough conversations. And I had told them, like, hey, I'm the highest paid person by far. Just let me go, and then you can keep paying all these people. And they're like, no, we don't want to do that. You're a huge part of this team. So they made me lay off, you know. I can't remember how many conversations I had, 30, 40 conversations. And then 2 weeks later, they laid me off. Damn. And I was like, oh, so you just wanted me to do your dirty work. Yeah. So I was just like, F that. Like, and so once they, you know, laid me off, I was like, good riddance. And I hopped on the first plane I could back to San Antonio, and then never have stepped foot back in a hotel, you know, in a working environment since. So that was the path.
That's wild. But awesome, man. Yes, that's crazy, man. So yeah, it must have been rough having to lay all those people off.
It was. And I've had to do it before too at other hotels. So I started to get, it sounds bad, but like started to get insulated from it, you know, like when you've had that many conversations and people start grinding in front of you, it's not like you don't care. It's just like, it's just a part of it. Yeah. And that was another huge part of why I didn't like it anymore. You know, it was like, I got into hotels because you want to like help people. And it sounds weird, but like, when you see people on vacations and they need it and they're just like there to relax, and then you're there to help them, or then there's an issue and then you help them overcome it. Or you give them like a really good recommendation after listening to like the kind of person they are. They're like, man, all those things that you said to do were spot on, versus like, oh, you guys aren't really into like the monuments and stuff, then skip the Alamo. The Alamo is tiny. It's really not that cool. You know, in my opinion, I don't want to offend all these San Antonians who are gung ho about it, but it's not cool. Like, I'm sorry. It's lame. If you're here, like, I think the Riverwalk is awesome, and locals talk shit about it all the time. I'm like, dude, the Riverwalk's awesome.
Yeah.
And then the Alamo, I think, is dumb. And people in San Antonio are like, no, it's the Alamo. I'm like, it's so dumb. It's the worst monument. You know, like, there's other missions. Like, I've biked the Mission Trail. There's other missions that are way sicker than the Alamo and way bigger and like have a way cooler history. And so it's like, that's what I told them to do. I was like, skip the Alamo, go rent bikes. When we used to have those e-bike rental here, I don't know if they still have it in San Antonio. I was like, do that and hit the mission south of here. And then they did that and they're like, how awesome was that? There was nobody on the path. I was like, yeah, exactly. So you got to do stuff like that. But as I moved up higher and higher into hotels, it was like less and less those kinds of interactions and more like guests who would come every year or twice a year and always had a bunch of problems. And you're like, the only reason you keep coming back is because you want free stuff. Yeah. Like, I'm on to this. And so then I would just be like, we're not doing this anymore. And then it was tough conversations. And then if it was like, hey, you know, they're going to give us poor reviews or we got a poor review. I'm like, good, we don't want that kind of client in our building anymore. Then it's like, then my bosses would come in and just be like, just give them the free room, you know? And I'd be like, this is so stupid. You know what I mean? And then there's other things that are like, hey, we're short staffed. We need to add staffing. And they're like, nah, we don't have that in the budget. Like the drivers that we use to do our labor calculations and stuff, you know, we can't afford to hire on another person. And it's like, oh, okay. Well, then we'd have 50 reviews that were negative about like the line at the front desk was 45 minutes long to check in on a Saturday morning, you know? And they wouldn't care because it's all about making money. Right. You know? And so it became, the higher I moved up, it was less about guest experience and more about just pocketing as much money as possible. So I was like, man, this is so stupid. Like, I don't want to be a part of this. You make me lay people off, have all these hard conversations. You don't really care about the guest experience anymore. And then the last caveat is like, the higher you go up, the closer you get to the ownership. So it's like, you think you're going to have more autonomy to make decisions. You have less and less autonomy because the closer and closer you get to the owners, good luck disagreeing with them. Right. Like those conversations were terrible, you know, and then you've got your management company telling you to do one thing, your ownership group telling you to do another thing, even though in the meeting on Wednesday, we were all on the same page. Then they'd politically pull you aside and be like, hey, I know we talked about that in the meeting, but who pays you? I'd be like, well, my management company pays me. Yeah, but who pays them? We do. We want you to do that. And I was like, dude, this is bullshit. Yeah. Like, I don't want to do this. Like my houses, I'm in control as much. There's tons of bullshit in flipping houses and stuff, but like I would way rather be in charge of that. Like I wake up when I want. Like this week, the last 2 weeks, I've woke up every day at like 5:30, 5:45, and I've been at the job site between 6:45, 7, you know, or Home Depot by 6:15. So yeah, there's downsides to it because I got to get it done. And I never really had to do that in hotels. It was like I'd wake up at the same time every day. I'd be done right around the same time every day. So you lose that autonomy. But I don't even remember what I was answering at this point. But yeah, I haven't looked back since I got into real estate full time. It's just like I wanted to leave that hotel world behind, and the next time I'm working in a hotel, I'm hoping it's because I own the hotel. You know, that's the goal. Yeah, I love that. Now, do you still do the Airbnbs, or is it just flipping now? No, I don't. So I got rid of everything once we had the 2020, 2021 massive increase in equity. I sold everything that I had rental wise. Looking back on it now, maybe I should have kept them just because rates were so low and I was locked in at pretty decent rates for investment properties. But I took all that cash to, you know, double down on flipping just because like it's the back and forth, right? It's like if I can have a portfolio of long-term investment, eventually they're going to pay off, you know, and I'm in a cash flow, but it's honestly tougher to cash flow in San Antonio because rents are pretty low and interest rates are high. So it's like, I'm not okay with renting and making $200 a door. I think this is a waste of time. Yeah. Like if I'm not netting at least $500 a door, like I don't want to touch it. And they're harder and harder to come by. So, while I know long-term, that's probably the better strategy. And I'm going to slowly start to pick those back up again. I just sit there and I'm like, if I can make $125,000 on a flip, you know how long that would take me to make 125 grand, even with rents and equity and like it still is like 15-year return to make that same thing. So I'm like, I would almost rather just keep pocketing the bigger spreads and then put that into stock market or hotel syndicate or apartment syndications, hotel syndications, you know, put it into syndications with other real estate stuff and let it grow that way and, you know, diversify in the stock market, but just make the cash up front. Yeah. But I think moving forward, it's going to be like pick up 1 or 2 a year, you know, in that realm. It's just hard because I've shifted completely to high end. I don't even remember how to underwrite mid-level deals anymore, honestly.
Yeah.
Like I look at it and I look at a house and my buddies will be like, yeah, man, I think, I put about 30, 35 into it and I should be good. And I'm like, how? Like that's 80, but that's just the way my mind looks at everything. Mm-hmm. So it's tougher for me, but I'll eventually get back into rentals because I know I need them. But it's the hard part is like the ones that make the best rentals also make home run flips.
Right.
So it's like a really good rental property is a home run for a flip. So then it's hard for me to sit there and go, am I going to give this up for that? Mm-hmm. But yeah, right now I don't have any.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So with the flips, I know you kind of have your own niche with you do the higher end stuff. Do you kind of want to explain how that came about? Are you choosing to focus on the higher end stuff and what the difference is between the higher end stuff and the lower end flips?
Yeah. I mean, just like everybody, you get told this story that on the lower end stuff, there's less risk. And so I started there too. It was like, I was looking at stuff. I think the first flip I ever bought about for $95,000, turned around, sold it for $160 or $165. This was on like 35 in Nacogdoches, that area, on the northeast side. And I think I lost $4,000 on that house or something like that, and then the next couple that I did, I made money, but it was always like, I think I'm going to make 60, I'd make 40. Mm-hmm. All right. I think I'm going to make 40, I'd make 20. All right. I think I'm going to make 30, I'd lost 4. Mm. And so it's just like, man, I got to do a lot of these. And it's kind of like when you're talking to multifamily investors and they're like, yeah, everybody wants to start with a 4-plex or an 8-plex or something like that. And they're like, start with 300 because it's the same. It's the same underwriting process. It's the same thing with hiring contractors, inspectors, engineers. All of it is the same amount of work, but it's a bigger property and a bigger profit. And so I slowly started to see that. And so one of my buddies brought me a property in Monte Vista. And so that was the first time I really delved out because I just sat there and I was like, there's got to be a better way. Like I should be able to make way more. And I feel like if I'm making way more, that's actually inherently less risky.
Right.
And so most of the time when I have ideas, it's not that I'm right. It's just that it's right for me. That's how my mind works. Yeah. So it's like I get confirmation bias all the time. I'm like, you know what I think would be a better investment strategy? And if I wait, I see somebody else do it and I'm like, see, I fucking knew it, but it's because my brain is wired a certain way. So I only see those opportunities. And so then there's confirmation bias in it. So anyway, I had that idea. I was like, you know what? I feel like on that house that I lost $4,000, like unforeseen things happened, things that I didn't think I was going to have to budget for happened, like on the exterior of the house, especially. I just didn't budget enough for it. And that's really what swung it the other direction. But on a big house, like the first one I did in Monte Vista, I bought that house for $441 or something like that. And it was a huge step. I was like, oh shit. But when I ran the numbers, it was like, I think I can get to 7 for sure. But I think I could probably push 750 on this house. And so I started doing the renovations, opened up the wall, boom, no ground wire. I've now since learned how to do other things than rewire a whole house, but I had to rewire that whole house. It was like $13,000, $14,000, something like that, to get that rewire done. On a standard flip, there's your profit. You're done. Right. On my flip, I was like, well, there goes $10,000 of my, or $14,000 of my profit, but I still had massive margin on it. So I just kept going.
Right.
Then it was like, all right, this pool is in disrepair now. Like we can't salvage it. We can't just do patches. We have to replaster this whole pool. Boom, another $12,000. So I'm like, on a normal house, not only did I lose money, I would have been in the negative. I would have been like, oh shit, not like break even or lose money off my profit. It's like, no, I literally would have lost money. I would have to come to the closing table with money to get rid of a house. On the high end, it was just like, all right, another 12, And so for me, it's that insulation that I really, really liked. So after that house was all said and done, it was $180,000, I think, in renovation. And then I sold it for $875. And I was like, holy shit. Granted, part of that, and I will admit part of that was the luck of the timing of everything just kept appreciating. So, but it still would have worked even at the 700 mark or 750 mark. Instead, I just made a killing on it, Yeah. I think I made like 160 or something like that. I can't really remember, but that was the first one that I was like, see, confirmation bias, it's just like, I fucking knew it. And so that's how I got into it. And then I over renovate everything anyway. And so I was definitely over renovating stuff in the beginning and I knew it, when I was talking to my buddies, I'd just be like, dude, why did you replace all the doors in the house? I'm like, cause they look like shit. And they're like, glue them together, clamp it, paint it, turn around and sell it. Like, why are you wasting money? You spent $4,000 replacing all the doors in a $185,000 house.
Yeah.
You know, and I was like, yeah, but I would want that if I was living in it. And they're like, but you're not living in it. And that was really hard for me to make that disconnect of like my upbringing, my standards, my taste don't matter in lower end flips. It's like, if I'm targeting somebody who's making $185,000 purchase, they probably have a $50,000 job.
Right.
They don't care if the handle's in one room to the next match. They don't care if there's a chip in the floor. They just care that they could buy that house. And that was really hard for me to get my head around. So on the high end stuff, it's like, you can't really over renovate. I mean, you can, I guess, to an extent, you know, like if you go put in a $150,000 pool and it's not going to return you any value, then yeah, you wasted $150,000. But for the most part, every dollar in, you get back out at minimum, you know? So like those high end things, if I'm putting marble in a house, instead of it costing me, you know, $14,000 for floor. I mean, these houses are big. So it's like, instead of it costing me $15,000 for a floor, if I'm going to do a marble in the entryway, that's going to match the fireplace hearth, that's going to match the laundry room, blah, 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 blah. And that now is costing me $25,000, $26,000. I get that back from the appraisal, and I get that back from offer prices, and I get waivers of appraisal, like partial waivers of appraisal from almost every buyer that I have, because the wealthy people that buy my homes just want what's nice.
Right.
And they have the money. And so when they do come in and they see, you know, the extra work that I've put in and put marble backsplash, marble here, marble there, marble wherever, they'll pay for that, because they're just like, well, apples to apples, the one down the street is $975, and the house that he just did is equivalent, if not better, and he's got it listed at $899 because we're buying them at such discounts, you know? So then it's like, when they're sitting there going, that one down the street costs more and we get less, like, so I have no problem lining up, and a lot of the houses that I sell in the first weekend, or if not by the second weekend. And so it's crazy. Like, to me, you're way safer in that realm than you are in the starter home. But yeah, that's kind of how I transitioned in. Again, it's natural tendencies. And I tell people that all the time. It's like, if you are able to see past things like not matching, or, you know what I mean? If you have that in you, that you're like, I don't know, when I grew up, I didn't have to deal with any of that shit. Like, my parents didn't care. Our house was just like a mix match of stuff. You're going to be great at flipping houses under $250,000 because you grew up with that and you don't care. You know, you don't care. Like, you can have the deadbolt that's bronze and a handle that's silver, and you don't care. But for me, I see that because my dad was a contractor and working in really high-end homes in Southern California. I've never not seen things match. I've never not seen, you know, like really nice stained woods next to stone products. So you've got soft and like, that's what I grew up around.
Yeah.
Like, not in my own house. We weren't, you know, wealthy by any means, but like, that's what I grew up seeing.
Right.
And so for me, it's really hard. So I tell people that all the time. It's like, if you grew up wealthy, cool, you should probably do high-end stuff because you know what wealthy people like. You know, like, if you grew up in the hood, then yeah, you're going to be great at that lower end stuff. And if you're going to do higher end stuff, you better have somebody guide you, because you will go in and not care about those details.
Right.
You know, it's just like, it's your upbringing. It's all the factors around you that shape like who you are in the vision and how you can see homes. And so I think a lot of people, just like, they listen to Bigger Pockets, and Bigger Pockets says, do this price point, and that's what they do. And then they're like, man, I can't make $1 on this.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, go to a different niche. It doesn't need to be what they're talking about, and it doesn't need to be high-end homes. You know, it's like, my buddy Daniel does a lot of burn houses, like, and he's really good at that now. So it's like, the first one was scary. The rest of them haven't been. So it's like, go find that niche, you know, like, if you, I don't know. I know we've talked about it before, but I'm like, the more you niche down, the better off you're going to be.
Right.
And people just don't get that. It's harder as a wholesaler. And I understand
it's hard
that.
as like any, like entrepreneur, like when you first think about it, it doesn't make sense. The idea that like niching down, like, why would I want to cut off all these people? But it's crazy. Like, how it's like, almost seems like an oxymoron, but it's true. Like, it really opens up so many more opportunities when you get real narrow.
It does. And from my limited experience in wholesaling that, you know, we've talked about, like, I found that as well for me. It was just like, the broader, because it was just me basically in a VA, but it's like, the broader I was, the more volume I had coming in, the more leads fell through the cracks. So it's like, if you're just starting out in wholesaling too, you know, like, most of these meetups we go to, and you hear people like, oh, well, what are you focusing? They're like, I'll take any deal in San Antonio. I'm like, you're going to fail. Right. And I don't say it in a rude way or like being mean. I'm just like, you're going to fail if that's what you're going to do, because you might have too many leads.
Right.
And you don't have the systems and processes. Like, you have systems and processes. You've got your CRM that you've built. You've got AI working, but like, you have all of that. For people who don't, it's like, do PPL and deal with like 10 leads a week, you know, and just pay for those 10 leads, but hammer those leads and follow up with those leads, and do that, because like, then you'll be successful. But if you're on your own and you have 1,000 leads a week and no systems, you're fucked.
Yeah.
Like you're absolutely fucked.
Right. Yeah. I don't get how people do it, or try to do it. And like, it's just, to me, it's just like, I get anxious just thinking about trying to do that without having the right systems in place. And
but that's the beauty of the experience, you know. And it's kind of funny because like when people get into it, they're like, I'm going to cast the largest net. And the people who are experienced are like, no, focus on something. Yeah. Just focus on something. Because that's my other favorite thing when people are like, well, are you fix and flipper or what do you do? Oh, I wholesale a little, I fix and flip, I do multifamily. And then I'm just like, okay, show me your portfolio then. Or are these all just ideas in your head of what you want to do?
Right.
You know what I mean? And like I was the same way. I still get the shiny object syndrome. And so I've narrowed it down to where like I'm fix and flip and I want to open an ALF, an assisted living facility. That's now my focus. Right? And if I come across a rental, cool, I'll do it. But it's not a focus of mine. It would have to fall into my lap. Because if I'm pursuing fix and flip, high-end fix and flip, and rental properties, totally different demographic there. Like, okay, now I'm distracted by that. Now I'm working in 2 different realms at once, and then I want to do an ALF. Okay, well, am I buying an existing facility or doing a ground-up facility? I have to manage those 4 things in my head. I'll never get anywhere.
Right.
But if I'm literally just like, I only do high-end flips in even Alamo Heights. Yeah, they're going to be fewer and further between, but when I get one, it pays, you know, in spades, like tenfold what I would have to make doing the higher volume stuff. So it's like, it's a game of patience and waiting and making sure that you don't like broaden it to so much. So bringing it back around, you know, it's like, that's why I tell people niche down, and you want it to be sparse. You want it to be fewer and farther between when you're first getting started so that you can handle it. Then once you can handle it, it's like, okay, now shift. You're like, now what do you want to add to it? You know, because I see that with guys all the time. It's just like, well, there's no more houses in San Antonio, so I think I might start moving up and buying some houses in Austin. I'm like, yeah, dude, there's like guys in Austin saying the same shit about Austin that are like, I'm going to branch out to San Antonio because there's just not enough deals. There's enough deals everywhere. Yeah. Everywhere. But that's like people's first step. And when I see that, I'm like, okay, well, where are you focusing in San Antonio right now? All of San Antonio, and there aren't any leads, so I got to go to Austin now. I'm like, well, that's your problem. Yeah. You're looking at all of San Antonio. It takes an hour to drive across San Antonio. Like, what do you mean there's not enough leads? Like, it blows my mind. So
no, that's a great point. Yeah, I used to live up in Austin. I have friends up there, and some in real estate. And yeah, they slowly say that. San Antonio, I might start investing down there. You know.
You're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it's too funny. But no, it's crazy. Yeah, I think maybe it's almost like an abundance and scarcity thing. Like when you're first starting, it's scarcity, and it's like and you just like kind of freak out and feel like you got to go for everything. But
that's 100% what it is. 100%. It's because you don't have the network built. Right. You know, it's like every time I'll still get a little scared when I'm like, man, I'm not in control of my deal flow, really. You know, like I track stuff and I know who brings me deals and what my avenues are. But then I sit here and I'm just like, shit, I don't know. And then I'll get a text out of the blue. Hey, you looking in this area? And I'm like, what are the numbers? Yes. Like they just, once you've built that network, they do come. It's just hard in the beginning because it is scarce because you don't have that network. But it's just like, go to every networking event and build that network. It was the same advice that was told to me, and I blatantly ignored it when I first got into real estate. Everybody was like, focus on your network for the first year or 2. And I'm like, that doesn't put money in my pocket. Right. Like, what kind of shitty advice is that? Well, it's because it was somebody who's seasoned in the industry and knows, like, oh no, it's the most important thing. So what I should have done is, as I'm hitting up every wholesaler and trying to build those relationships and get homes, I would then start flipping a house and I'd stop going to all the RIAs. What I should have done is taken that one day and left work early on that flip and gone to the RIAs still. And it would have put me years ahead of where I ended up being in the pace that it took me, because I was just like, well, now I've got to flip. Now I got to focus all my attention on this flip because you got to get in and out and in and out. And it's like, man, go into the RIAs, even if it's once a week and you give up 2 hours, you know, once a week. So you gave up 8 hours in the entire month. Like, it's worth it because you went to 4 different RIAs and you networked and you broadened your horizons, and now more deals are going to come to you. But I didn't do it either when I first got into it. And that was probably what slowed me down most of all.
No, it's super important. It's something I got to like consciously remind myself to do even now, because I hate going out and not working and like working all week. I'm like, I just want to stay in and not see people. It's like me an introvert sometimes, but just funny because you do your own events. But yeah, I don't know. Sometimes just don't want to get out of the house. But it is just reminding yourself how important it is, and that, like, even though, like you said, you're not going to see the immediate, you know, benefits, or you could, but more than likely not. It's more long-term play. But just know that like it's important. It is a huge long-term play to make.
Oh yeah, and I think that's why a lot of people give up. You know, it's the same with real estate agents. When people are just like, oh yeah, the average real estate agent is like quits within the first 18 months or something like that. And it's like, yeah, because you were chasing leads the entire time.
Yeah.
Like if you were building relationships, it would have worked. But instead you were just chasing leads. And like you can't build actual rapport with people if you're just chasing them as a lead. And I mean, I learned that from wholesaling. I've told you about my failures in trying to wholesale. It was like I was just went through my script so quickly. And, you know, we had talked about that a couple of weeks ago about how you build rapport with clients. And it was just like, I just skipped that step because I was just like, oh yeah, I got to check all these boxes and get through it and run through it. And then I would be frustrated when I didn't get the house, versus if I would have just built rapport and been like, okay, yeah, cool. I can tell they're not in a like pressing situation. I probably would have locked that house up 4 months later, 5 months later.
Right.
But 4 months later, I had stopped being a wholesaler. And then when I was getting those texts, I would get alerts from the CRM being like, this person has texted you. And I was like, whatever. Yeah. You know, like I'm up to hearing flips now, and I've kind of given up on that. But you do see that, you know, like the 3 or 4 month lag from when you're, you know, marketing to people, or from when you first make contact to when you can follow up and get those deals. But yeah, you see it with real estate agents all the time too. You know, they get all gung ho because it's so easy to get your license. And I'm now licensed as well, you know, and it was a joke how easy it is.
Yeah.
But I did it so I can rep myself on deals and hopefully be a better representative for most people who have shitty representation, you know? But I'm not sitting there going, oh man, now I got to hit that hard and become an agent. It's like, no, I'll let it organically grow.
Right.
And if it grows, great. And if it doesn't, okay. But it will, but it'll just be organic because I'm not in a rush. You know, it's not like it's putting food on the table. It's kind of like bonus spending money for me. But people just don't wait long enough for, you know, to bear the fruit of their labor.
Right.
They either give up or they get frustrated and they pivot, you know? And I feel like you hear that all the time in like tech, and my brain just works in a very nonlinear way. So I start to ramble, but like you see it in tech all the time, and they're just like, oh yeah, this didn't work. And so then we had to pivot, and and like, that's just like this catchphrase now. And so people are like, oh no, I tried doing, you know, fix and flip, but there just wasn't enough deals. So I'm going to pivot and become a wholesaler now. And then they go to a wholesaler and they're just like, man, I talked to 100 leads this week and I didn't get a single appointment. Like I'm pivoting to multifamily. Oh man, I'm doing multifamily, but they're getting hit up by all these people. Now I'm pivoting to raising private money. And I'm just like, you're just going to keep pivoting until you have no money coming in.
Right.
Like you literally just have to stick to one thing, quit pivoting. Like if you can't give it a full year, you're never going to understand if you could have done it or not.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. No, it's crazy like how things seem to work out when you just cut out all other options and just keep pushing ahead. And yeah, it's, you know, just having that mindset, like you're going to give it a year, but it probably won't take that long. But like just knowing that, like, how, like I'm going to do this, or I'm going to fucking die. And like shit happens when you get that mindset.
That's why I tell people to quit, man. You nailed it. Like when people say like, oh yeah, it's kind of scary though. Like you quit your job, then where's your money coming from? I'm like, exactly.
Yeah, figure it out.
Exactly. Like it's just people don't want to get that uncomfortable feeling, you know, but it's like when you have no other choice, like I've gone through it a couple of times. I'm going through one right now, you know, of like market shift, things outside of my control that changed. And I'm sitting there looking at like, well, I can either give up on this and lose a couple $100,000, or I see this through. And yeah, I might end up making like 80 grand on a deal that I've had for 2 years that I was going to make 350 grand on. Well, that's still better than losing a couple $100,000.
Right.
You know, but yeah, it's like the fear of I have nothing else to go back to. It's like I can go get a job if I want, but then I would feel like an epic failure. Like it's not that that's what I would be, but I feel that way in my mind. So it's like, man, if I had to go back into a hotel and get a job, because that's kind of my skill set, like I could get hired tomorrow, but if I did that, then I'm gonna be like, oh fuck, now I gotta wake up at 7 to be at work at 8 to punch it. You know, it's just like, man, I don't want to do that. And that's all it takes is, you know, 2 hours in my head driving where I'm like, God, that sounds terrible. All right, pick up the phone and make that call, you know? And then you're like, you're back on the grind, because it's like, it's either go hungry or get a job. Yeah. And it's like, and I don't want to do either of those things.
Well, you do it long enough, eventually you become unemployable. So nobody likes to talk about it. You can't have a resume like, why haven't you worked in 12 years? Like, you're just going to quit and leave and go work somewhere else. So, yeah, because I've had different periods of, you know, entrepreneur, like, oh, let's take a job for a short period of time or whatever, and, you know, or whatever, and just, you know, job sounds nice because the shit's stressful as fuck. And it's like, no one will hire you.
Isn't that funny? Like, look at this whole, like, I went to college. I've got this whole resume. I worked in hotels for 12 years. I'm like, yeah, but what have you been doing for the last 7? I'm like, oh, I've been running my own business. Oh, so you're a failure, and now you want to come back to us? And I'm like, no. Well, kind of. Yeah. And then once you get back on your feet again, you're going to leave us? Well, probably.
Yeah.
Which is funny because when you're in an interview, that's like, I remember when I was interviewing people, I'd always say that. I'm like, well, you're clearly not going to be committed to this job then, know? And it's like, dude, it didn't matter. It was like our turnover was like 9 to 18 months every time. It didn't matter if they were the best, if they gave us whatever answers in the interview, if they were our best employee, because it was like, if they were our best employee and they were super loyal and dedicated, other people found out real quick because the networks are so small. And then they'd be like, you should come to our hotel. If our hotel could offer you, what's your number? And they'd be like, well, I would have to make, as a front desk agent, say, my front desk agents would get poached all the time because we train them really, really well. But our budget would be $14 an hour. And they're like, well, all right, well, Omni is hiring at $17 an hour. Well, $3 an hour is huge for a 21-year-old, like that's a big, big deal. So I was like, you train them all up and they would be great. And they'd be like, man, I appreciate so much everything you've taught us. This is so great. But they're offering me $17 an hour and you guys won't come up. Yeah. And then I'd be like, all right, well, let me see what I can do. Go into the accountant's office or the, I can't remember what they call it, the controller. And she'd be like, we could do $14.25. And I'd be like, all right, well, there goes our front desk staff. Because as soon as she leaves, the rest of them are going to follow. And that's what it would be. It would just be a mass exit. So it was like, it didn't matter how good you were at training or trying to do retention. It's all this like corporate culture bullshit, know, like that just gets pounded into you. That's like, no. When you're dealing with hourly employees, the amount of money they make is all they fucking care about. Right. I mean, you want to build company culture for your executive team, your salaried employees, cool. But the other stuff, it's like they would just bounce. Yeah.
That makes sense. So going back to, you mentioned kind of, what you track where you're getting your leads from and who's bringing you deals. What is your main source of getting deals and what are the different ways you find these flips?
Yeah. I mean, most of it's network. And so that's a really hard one to hammer down on. But that network consists of, I can split it out or keep it together, I guess, in my mind. But it's like, it's real estate agents, it's wholesalers, and it's just like friends in my network, friends of friends, that they're like, oh yeah, Nate does a flip and so-and-so's neighbor is now going to go sell their house. I get texts like that all the time. That's the number one deal source, I would say. And then number two is foreclosure auctions, and also REO auctions. So like, Hubzu, auction.com. Hubzu is great because a lot of the REO properties, they'll let you use hard money. So some of them will be cash, even though they're REO. But like this one I have right now that I'm finishing up tomorrow. Well, they're there cleaning it today. And then I've got some touch up tomorrow and staging tomorrow. I bought that on Hubzu. But even that one on Hubzu was brought to me by an agent who saw it on Hubzu and was like, hey, there's this property in Hunters Creek that you should pick up. It's on the auction site. So I was like, okay. And she got paid out. Like I had to pay her still because it was a buyer's premium that you have to pay, which you have to watch out for on those sites. But, yeah, I mean, it's people in my network knowing what my buy box is. Cause mine's pretty, again, niched down, that when they see a property that fits that box, they know to call me because they know I'll buy it. Right. Like if the numbers make sense, I will buy it and I will always go through with that. So I think, in a roundabout answer to that, it's like, yeah, your network is important, but also when they bring you a deal that fits your buy box, buy it. Right. That's your number one thing because once you build that reputation, they're like, well, if I take it to Nate, he'll buy it. Right. And so it might not always be at my number. And so I'll tell them, I'm like, hey, great find. I need it at X. And if you can't get it at X, totally understand. But right in my wheelhouse, this was a perfect deal. The other one, foreclosure. Yeah. So like REO ones, these are typically, they've gone through foreclosure. Nobody bought them at the auction. Now the banks got it. Banks aren't in the game of real estate, so they're in mortgages. So the second they have a property, they want it gone. And so they've got agents that will go and list them for them. And then they've got foreclosure auction or, REO auctions on auction.com and Hubzu. So you can pick them up there. If you have an agent or you are an agent, you can get direct with them. And then those mortgage houses, like will come to you directly and you can represent them more than just buy them yourself, So that's a huge one. Up in Comal County, it's like we literally go to the auction for the mortgage foreclosure auction and you can try to steal them before that, which is what I do a lot as well. So once they're on the foreclosure list, it's 3 weeks until they're going to be sold on the courthouse steps. That's when I'll go after those. Most wholesalers have already gone after them just because they're on pre-foreclosure lists and things like that. So they've been hammered, but, again, because I do higher end, I'm a low volume, high margin. Right. And so I only need, if my network of agents, friends, and wholesalers bring me 2 deals a year between all of them, everyone that I know. Like, and I literally get brought 1 or 2 deals a week, and then I can, look and see if they're decent or not. But it's like, if I can get 2 from that network and I can get 1 from the foreclosure auction, and then I can still pick them up on the MLS, because a lot of these high priced homes, if they aren't renovated, nobody wants to buy them.
Yeah.
Rich people don't want to buy a problem. They don't want to pay 2 mortgages. They don't want to do all that. So I still comb the MLS, and I'll just put drastically lowball offers in on these things, because a lot of them are like just getting out of probate, or they're in a state. And so then I'm coming in, and they're just like, the agents will tell them that, like, we can sell it, and they can sell something in Alamo Heights unrenovated, built in 1964 or 1962. They can still sell that house for $700,000 if they're willing to wait 12 months.
Right.
They can get it. Somebody will come along and fit that. Most of these people with estates are like, I just want to get out of this. Like, I just want to sell it. Like, the kids are strapped for cash, and one of the brothers is like, no, screw that. I need the money, because they all stand to make $150,000 each, like each descendant, and so they'll push to be like, well, let's just get rid of it, and so that 700, I can usually come in and pick it up for $550, knowing that I can turn that house into something that's $950 or $1 million. Like, and I can get that. And that sounds like it's an insane spread, but it isn't, because these are big homes.
Right.
I'm some of them, if it's a smaller house, I got to pop the top and add a second story. Or like the Canyon Lake, I'm adding 2 stories to it. So it's going from a 2-story to a 4-story. Like, they're massive projects that I take on. But, if I'm going to put 200 or 300,000 into it and I buy it for 5, I'm now at 8, and now I'm going to go list it at 1. It's like, all right, I could make maybe $150,000 on that, but if I have to do a price cut, it's down to 100. If I have to do another price cut, it's down to 50, and then I put $300,000 into a house to make 50. It's just not worth it, Yeah. But so yeah, those are the main sources: the network, the foreclosure, and then still MLS.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, can you break down what your buy box is? I know we have a lot of wholesalers that listen, and maybe they can send you some more deals too. So, like, what is your buy box? I think you made a great point too, that a lot of people that are looking to get in fix flips don't really have a good buy box. So, like, if you say, hey, I do everything, I'm going to think of you for nothing, because I don't have something that I'm going to.
Yeah, you'll be on my list. And I think that's a really big point, especially coming from somebody who does do wholesaling. It's like the mental aspect of that is, if you never niche down your buy box, you're just going to be on the dispo list. You're going to get the email like I do. I still get emails from Net Worth, New Western. I'm on all their dispo lists, and every now and then I'll see something like, oh, that looks a little bit interesting. But for the most part, I don't. They just go into my inbox, and I never see them. I've got 22,000 unread emails in my inbox. You know what I mean? It's just like I never look at them. But with my buy box, it's $750,000 to $1.2 million ARV. Purchase price, I never really get into that, just because it's like, if I can get it for $1, awesome. So it's like, I never understood that when people were like, and I got to have a purchase price of this to this. It's like, my purchase price is 0 up to where the deal works. So ARV 750 to 1.2 million. I will take deals slightly below and slightly over. It's just my spread has to be higher. And then in the areas that I'm looking, I try it to be in Guadalupe and Comal counties if I can, especially outside of like cities. So if I can be outside the city of New Braunfels, great. If I can be outside the city of Seguin, great. It's just a lot easier for me with the stuff I have to do. I don't have to deal with the cities inspecting everything, being out in the county. The only inspections I have are for sewer, replatting, and roadways. So it's like, other than that, I can do whatever I want. I don't have to have inspections on anything. So that saves you a ton of time and money. But yeah, it's the neighborhoods inside San Antonio. It's, Alamo Heights is number 1 for sure. Olmos Park is probably one of my favorite places. I just have yet to do one in Olmos Park. I like Monta Vista. I like Mankey Park. Just that area right around Alamo Heights ISD. So I always talk about that too, is like having a limiting constraint. And my limiting constraint is trying to stay in Alamo Heights ISD. And if I have a house that's just outside of that, it's crazy. Like, the house will drop in value by $250,000, $300,000 just because it's on the other side of Alamo Heights ISD. So, it's 750 to 1.2 from downtown in a V up I-10, I-35, all the way out past 1604. Typically, if it's outside city limits, otherwise the neighborhoods that I talked about. So, That's kind of my buy box. It doesn't sound as specific when I just said it that time, but most of the time as I'm running through it, it sounds far more specific than that. But
yeah, no, it sounds a lot more specific than I think what a lot of people have, and
Yeah.
it still gives you people a frame of reference. What's the best way for people to send you deals if they have one that fits that buy box?
It's just to text me. Yeah. So 210-952-6145. It's text me. Like, again, I get that all the time, or like I'll see something on Facebook, and then I'll reach out, and then it's some wholesaler somewhere, and they're like, well, I sent it to you in an email. I'm like, how many times have I told you? I do not check my email. And you've got to know that thousands of your investors don't check their email because it just goes to spam. But if you shoot me a text and you're like, hey, just sent a deal to your email, or Dispo just went out, there's one on there for you, this is the address, then I'll go check my email. But yeah, text or calling me is the best way.
Yeah.
I can't remember his name right now off the top of my head, but there's one wholesaler that, like, he literally calls me every time he thinks he's got a deal in my wheelhouse. And every time I see the phone ring, I answer it immediately because I'm like, this dude puts the effort in to call me. And so it's like, just by him calling me, I will always field his call because I'm like, bro, you're putting in the extra effort. So
I love that. Now, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see that wholesalers make when working with buyers? And like, what are things they can do to better build relationships with buyers?
Yeah, and I mean, I hopefully we'll turn this into more of an exchange, because I look at it from my perspective. Wholesalers look at it from their perspective, right? The number one thing to me is backing into your number where the profit is always the same is the number one red flag to me of a wholesaler, right? What that tells me from that wholesaler is that the dollar is more than the relationship, right? And I deal with this with real estate agents as well. When like they won't reduce their commissions, I'm like, the dollar is better than the relationship, then that's fine. You're about to lose 6 homes with me, which could have net you $150,000 in commission. I do the same thing with wholesalers. It's like, yes, you lock that up. And again, I want everybody to make money, but it's like, if a wholesaler comes to me, and you see this all the time with Net Worth and New Western deals, when you back out the numbers, magically every deal they bring you is a $30,000 spread, every single one. I'm like, how about that? Because they're always going into it and going, all right, for this price home, if we want to make 30 grand profit, let's take that out. Now what's the ARV? Now how much, or what's our purchase price? Now how much is the reno cost? And then now whatever is left over, anything under 110, we can make. So if they lock that property up for 20, they're still going to try to push it at 110.
Right.
And I'm like, why? Like, why? You really need to make a home run on every single deal. Like, and then they'll start to get creative because they're like, oh yeah, we're wholesalers, but we're going to novate this one, or we're going to just turn around and wholesale this one. And it's like, yeah, to each their own. But I'm like, again, you're navigating outside your range. And while you might want to go wholesale that deal and go make a killing on it, your eye is now off the prize of being a wholesaler. So yeah, you might make 60 grand, 70 grand. And for you, that's a home run. But you could have had 3 base hits in the meantime, just doing your same thing over and over and over again, and then sold it to me. And instead of making an $80,000 spread, you could have made 50.
Right.
And then the deal makes sense to me because now I'm like, oh, good, more room on it. Because wholesalers will like to do that when they bring me deals. It's like, look, man, I'm running comps, and this happened the other day. And this wasn't actually a wholesaler, this was an agent. But it was like, we're seeing comps at, 1.2. And I'm like, cool. And they're outside the legal subdivision. You can't just cherry pick the comps you want, Like, yes, there are. But there's also one right next door that's very problematic at 897.
Right.
What about that one? Well, that one. And then they'll have every excuse in the book, So it's like, the sweeter the deal is for me, the more I'm going to buy it too. And then every time you bring me something, I know that I can trust you. I know that you're bringing something truly in my buy box, and I don't have to question it.
Right.
Because for me, especially in high end, it's like the risk is much greater.
Yeah.
And so somebody can bring me a house and be like, Nate, I got a house for you, 1.5 million. I can get it to you for $1 million. That still scares the shit out of me.
Yeah.
Because nobody knows high end, and wholesalers don't know high end. Right. So it's like, if they pick that up at 800,000 and they're like, I can get it to you for $1 million, and they're trying to make 200 grand off of me. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but it's like, when you get into those higher price homes and there's more risk for me, I need more margin.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to take that house when the deal makes sense. We're like, oh yeah, you'll net 150 grand, because to them they're like, 150 grand on a flip, that's fucking sick. And I'm like, okay, cool. Then why don't you buy it? Tell me why. Because it's scary as hell. Like, I have to buy a house for $1 million. You know what my carrying costs are going to be on that if I buy that with hard money?
Yeah.
You're like, I'm looking at almost $12,000 a month in interest only. So if this project does take me a year, that's $150,000 in interest alone, not counting my utility payments, not counting the, interest on my credit cards, not counting what I have to give my private money lender who's funding the rehab portion, or when I'm taking draws. Like, I'm going to spend almost $200,000 in financing on that property, because it's going to take me a while to sell a house that big. So yeah, I would say that's like the number one thing. Long ass answer again, as always, sorry. But it's like, yeah, don't do the formulaic, to me. Don't do that formulaic thing where you back out and then almost every single deal works out that way. Because as flippers, Ky, you could bring me a deal tomorrow and be like, here are the numbers. Not that I don't care, but I'm going to go, cool. And now I'm going to look it up myself, because I know what I'm doing. And every flipper that knows what they're doing is now going to rerun those numbers. Right. Doesn't matter what you told them. They're going to go, okay. And then I'm going to run my numbers and go, okay, got it. Magically, every time Ky brings me a deal and I underwrite this deal, I make 30 grand. Doesn't matter, which tells me that that wholesaler does not care about building that relationship. It's just like, they can squeeze 70 on this one, 10 on the next one, 80 on the next one. And I get it. You want to, get the biggest spread possible, I guess. But it's like, if you bring people real deals instead of these cookie cutter $30,000 spread deals every single time, like, that person will buy every single time. Yeah. And to me, that's a hell of a lot easier as a dispo agent to just be like, I know that I can sell these to Nate every single time, because there's a minimum of $100,000 spread on that property. And if you just do that over and over and over again, like, I'm going to be that 100% buyer. But if you can't move it because you're trying to do it too tight, and then the next thing you got to do is do a price drop, which I see all the time from wholesalers in my texts, like, ooh, that 3-bed, 2-bath in San Antonio, massive price drop. And then they drop it 20 grand. And I'm like, or you could have just come out the gates like that. Instead, now all of us as flippers, I'm not lying, we all sit there and we all go, well, now I'm going to wait till the next one. Yeah. Well, now I'm going to wait till the next one. So it's like, you do a price drop as a wholesaler, you just shot yourself in the foot. So you don't always have to be super greedy about it. It's like, think about the relationship too. Find that balance. Yeah.
I think that's a great point. You're not cherry picking the comps. You're not just kind of being deceitful on certain things. And like, if you don't know, it's okay to say you don't know. Like I said, you give a lot of feedback to the wholesalers that come to you and bring you the deals. So yeah, I feel like that's a better way to go about it for sure. Yeah. But awesome. Any other ideas or something? Or like, so how, if a guy calls you out of the blue, you don't have a relationship with them, how does that normally go? Or, what do you see that they do, like when you get calls from new wholesalers? They usually handle it well, or this is I'm glad you brought this up, because this happened to me 3 times this week alone. I have no problem with wholesalers reaching out to me. I think it's great business practice. You should be doing it. It helps me out. Like, if I get a call, I'm always going to listen. But it's been wild to me, the lack of professionalism and like knowledge going into that call. And I had one 2 days ago, and I'm sitting there working on this flip, and I'm panicked because I'm just like, fuck, am I going to get this all done in time? Because I'm very active in my flips and I'm on the job site. And so I answer, and he's just like, oh, is this Nathan Schoen Investments? I'm like, yeah, oh, hey, the reason I'm calling is I see you're actively an investor, and like, I don't try to be rude, but I already know where it's going. And so I'm like, yeah, man, are you a wholesaler? Well, I'm like, you can just tell me, like, yes or no, like, oh yeah, I am, okay, cool. Well, are you actively buying right now? Yeah. I always will. Like, this is my buy box. This is whatever. And they're just like, okay, well, could I get your email? And I'm just like, bro, you got to be much quicker, like faster, smoother if you're going to reach out. And like, no, you clearly looked up that I'm actively flipping. Why are you asking me what my buy box is? Right. You should know. You've looked me up on public record. You know what houses I've sold. So it's like, don't come in and then make me repeat all those things. And I know this isn't me, this is making me sound like a prima donna, I'm sure, but it's not. It's more of just like, if you do that, that's going to mean the world to me, of like, hey, I see you're very active. The last 3 homes you sold are all like 700,000 or more. Like, is that what you focus on? Yep. That's my focus. Okay. Well, we don't come across those all the time, but when we do, if we had one that we brought to you, like, could you take the deal flow? Because we get them every now and then. Yeah, of course, man. Perfect. But like, it's not hard. You're already looking me up by cash transactions or whatever, through PropStream or whatever you're using. So it's like, put that little bit of effort in, but so many of them call
and they're just clueless.
Yeah.
You know, like they're absolutely clueless. And there's a couple properties that still to this day I sold 5-6 years ago, and people still call and they're just like, are you interested in selling this house? And like, I don't hold back on those ones. Like, you guys are fucking idiots and you're going to fail.
Yeah.
Like, I haven't owned that house in 5 years. Like, it's not hard to do that second step. But again, I know a lot of it is just volume. But when you're calling looking for dispo, like looking to find cash buyers, like put the effort to be educated about who you're calling.
Yeah.
Because it's not hard. It's right there where you found my phone number. You know, like that's the most important part. I get it when you're just like canvassing, trying to find sellers. It's just a numbers game. You got to call 150 leads to get 20 appointments to get 3 contracts or whatever your metrics are. Totally understand that. But for cash buyers, we're proven. You already know the answer. Do you buy? Obviously. You found me in the public record. Like, you found the transaction. Obviously I buy. Are you actively buying? Obviously. I just sold that one 3 weeks. Like, don't ask those dumb questions or it immediately like loses rapport with me.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. That probably makes me sound like a dick, but it's like, to me, it's not hard to do those things because that's what I do.
Right.
That's what I'll do. Like when an agent calls me and I'm selling a house, like I start asking a bunch of questions, you know, whereas when I hear other agents, they're like, oh yeah, this agent's calling about the house. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. What did they want to know? Well, they were just wondering like bed bath count and, you know, when was it renovated? Did you do a full gut, blah, blah, blah. And all that. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Like, well, where are the buyers coming from? Are they local or are they out of state? Oh, I don't know. Okay, well, is this in the high end of their price range or is this the low end or like what's the price range that they're looking at? Well, I don't know. Are they looking in just this neighborhood and that's why they called, or are they just looking for anything over $700,000 throughout San Antonio, or do they want the school district, or what are they after? Well, I don't know. Like what? It's why I handle all my own transactions, because if an agent calls me and just like, hey, can you tell me a little bit about the house? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Tell me a little bit about your client. Like, I'm always going to take that opportunity. You know, I'm not going to sit there and call agents like Phyllis Brown and go through their list and be like, hey, this is Nathan. I've got this house at, you know, 13210 Hunters View Street that's about to come onto the market. Do you have any buyers? Well, how did you find me? You know, it's like, oh, well, I saw you had 3 buyers in that neighborhood recent. You know what I mean? It's like, come with that knowledge and build that rapport, letting them know that you know what you're doing, and it'll go miles. It'll absolutely go miles if you're trying to build your dispo list.
Yeah, I think there's some great points there for sure. Yeah. Yeah, and just play devil's advocate. I have had on the other side.
Oh yeah, that's why I said make an exchange, because I know it's different from your guys' perspective.
I have had people, especially more in like smaller areas. I mean, here in San Antonio, I mean, wholesaling is huge. Pretty much everyone's investors know what it is. But there's been like other markets they'll call and they're like, what's wholesaling? You're trying to scam me? Like, how'd you get my info? And they like freak out and they're like, what do you mean you got public records? So.
Yeah.
But I think, they're just feeling the person out and just having like a real conversation as opposed to just like interrogating them and like reading question after question after question.
Agreed.
It's off-putting for sure.
But I think there's an opportunity there too. You know, it's like the same as the opportunity with the new NAR dispute. Like buyers going out there or sellers going out there and just being like, well, I'm going to wait until after August where I don't have to pay the commissions anymore. And if you have a good agent, that good agent's going to be like, do you have 2 minutes so I can explain what's actually going on here versus going, okay, because I see it all the time on Facebook. You know, it's like agents complaining about X, Y, and Z. 90% of those things are just educating them, you know? And so I know, like when you had that conversation with the guy, I know you explained it to him, and some people you can't break through to, but it's just like, nope, this is what it is. It's totally legal. And here are the benefits for you. Like, what are you looking to get out of the sale of your home? And you can navigate that conversation and educate them. But I think there's probably a lot of wholesalers when they're just like, when they get that pushback, they're like, oh, it's like, all the time you're trying to overcome the objections when you're getting them to sell you your house. But now magically somebody doesn't know what wholesaling is or thinks it's illegal. Spend the same time educating them and you can probably get that deal done. Right. You know, but yeah, agents are going to lose so much just from the NAR dispute. And it's just like, no, like it's just, we just can't publish it anymore in the MLS. Yeah. You know, and it's all negotiable. It's always been negotiable. And so I am so glad that it happened, because I've sat there and I've told you that story before of those agents who would not reduce their commission. And I've sold 5-6 houses in that same area and I would have used them for all of them. Yeah. But they wouldn't drop it from 5 to 4 or from 6 to 4 or 6 to 5. You know what I mean? They just wouldn't do it. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, then hold to that. Like, but you just cost yourselves $150,000 in commissions that you could have had, but whatever.
Yeah. No, it's definitely it's a relationship business for sure.
Yeah.
But man, so I know you have just had the honor of going on your podcast recently. Do you want to tell us a bit about your podcast?
Yeah, it's called The Unfiltered Investor. If you haven't gathered right now through me talking to Ky, like I just kind of, I'm a straight shooter. I call it like I see it, and I call bullshit when I see it. So if you're interested in listening to something like that, Unfiltered Investor, it's on Spotify right now. I'm going to do the RSS feed so I can get on to the other ones. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. But yeah, we try to go by the name of the podcast, and I have guests on, and we don't really hold back. Like, I like to say things as they are, just because a lot of our podcasts out there now, especially in the real estate space, is like, one, they're trying to sell a product, they're trying to sell something to you instead of just bringing you value, and then they're really afraid of the repercussions because it is a network-based business, Yeah. But it's like, to me, people much more appreciate straight shooters than bullshitters.
Right.
And so that's what I've tried to do with that podcast, is just like ask people honest opinions. And then if they're not willing to do it, I do. And I kind of lead the way with it. And then magically they'll start to like open up and tell their true feelings about certain stuff. But yeah, I've had multifamily guys on there, ALF guys on there, wholesalers, fix and flippers. And yeah, it kind of runs the gamut of everybody. I've yet to really have like a dedicated real estate agent on there, so I should probably do that, but I've got a hard slant against real estate agents, so I don't know if anybody would want to come on there and be berated by me, but yeah, Unfiltered Investor on Spotify.
I love it, man. Yeah, I think it's definitely needed. I think to have more honest conversations. I feel like, especially even society as a whole, I feel like a lot of people are just fucking afraid to say what's really on their mind.
100%.
But I love it, man. So as far as, I know you gave your phone number earlier, do you want to repeat that again in case anyone has a deal they want to send you, and then on social media, or is there a best place for people to connect or follow with you?
Yeah, the easiest one is Renovate with Nate. It's my Instagram handle. You'll see all the content that I put out. I've slowed down a lot recently, so I need to ramp that back up again, but I try to be educational on that as well. And then you can DM me on there. My phone number is 210-952-6145. I won't give out my email because I don't check it.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you want to get a hold of me, by all means, I've been on a few podcasts and I've given out my phone number, and I love it when people call. Yeah. I'm like, oh, cool. Like, and some people give feedback on what we were talking about or whatever, but it's like, I will answer, or if I don't, because I'm busy, if you send me a follow-up text, I will text you back. I will call you back. It's just crazy. Yeah. There's like thousands of people listening to some of the podcasts that I've been on, and I'll get like 4 calls or 4 texts, and I'm like, I literally gave you the exact way you can get a hold of me if you have any questions, because I think that's huge too. And I know you're in the same boat of like giving back, and it's like, I'm the same way. It's like, if you're an early investor and you're actually willing to learn, like, I'm more than happy to help share things with you. But it's the same. It's like, there's some kind of people that will call and just like waste your time, and they're just asking elementary questions, and then they argue with you. And it's like, you called me because I've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
So it's like, don't argue with me. I guess I'll say that. If you do call me, like, try not to argue with the advice that I'm giving you, because it's, I've been doing it and you haven't. Yeah. So that always shocks me though when people do that. They're like, I want to reach out. You said this on this podcast. It was great. I'm like, okay, cool. What are you looking to get into? This. Like, there's this guy I met at a meetup. I'm not going to shit on him because he's actually a really, really cool guy. He's a young guy. And, he's like, yeah, I'm about to, renovate my house, and eventually it's gonna be a rental. And he like sent me all these granite samples, and he's just like, yeah, man, I'm excited. I think I'm gonna do this one on the right. I'm like, Cameron, that's hideous, dude. Yeah. Do not put that in a house. And he's like, well, you don't think it? I'm like, no. I was like, you need a neutral tone floor. What do you have? Cool, that can stay. Let me see your cabinets. All right, you got to paint the cabinets. Well, what color? Depends on the countertops. I'm like, but you can paint the cabinets first and pick the countertops, or pick the countertops and then paint the cabinets. But like, you cannot put that old brown and tan granite into a house. Well, I think it's kind of tasteful and classic. I'm like, it does not matter what you think. It matters what renters want, not what you want. So like, but he sat there and he argued, and I just like laughed. And so I finally was just like, I'm not helping you anymore if you're not going to listen. Yeah. Like, get out of your own goddamn way,
Yeah. But that's the most frustrating thing in the world. But I hate when like people like, they ask for advice and you can tell in real time, just not listening. Mm-hmm. And then they're just like, yeah, I don't know.
Oh, I'm sure they're like, hey, I'm getting into wholesaling. Hey, Ky, how would you approach this conversation? And you're like, step 1, 2, and 3. Like, where's your script? Mm-hmm. I don't really believe in scripts. Yeah. And you're like, no, no, you have to use the script. God. I still use my script. Yeah. I use my script every day and I don't waver from it. Yeah, man, I think I'm going to do it differently. Mm-hmm. And you're like, all right, come ask for advice. And then it's like, they just want confirmation bias of what they think. Mm-hmm. They want to hear you be like, I don't use a script. And they go, see, I knew it. You know, but you're like, no, use a script. They're like, but I don't think I should. You're like, well, then you're not going to be successful, and stop asking me questions.
Right. Yeah. No, word for word. That's like pretty much exact conversations. Well, that's great. Well, I highly recommend going to follow Nate. Go check his podcast out. But man, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Yeah, man. I appreciate it. Good to see you again.
Yeah, for sure. We'll have to do this again.
Yeah, absolutely.